Now, when new technology comes along, it influences language. It has to. Technology always has influenced language, quite dramatically. Think of the technologies of the past. Printing arrives in the 15th century. Suddenly, we have new varieties of English that weren't there before. New varieties of any language, of course, but we're talking about English today. We have newspapers eventually. And look at the style of a newspaper with its headlines and the cartoons and the captions and the editorials and all the things you now know about a newspaper. Once upon a time, there was no such thing. So fast forward to the 19th century and we have the development of the telephone. You know, when the telephone arrived, people did not know how to deal with it. They didn't know what to say when they picked up the phone. They would shout and say, "Who is that? Are you there?" and so on. Today we just go, "Hello," or we give the telephone number, or whatever it is we do. People thought the telephone was going to be the biggest disaster in society because it would mean people would no longer go out of their houses to talk to each other. And it would be a disaster. Of course, it hasn't been like that. When broadcasting comes along in the 1920s, a lot of people thought it was a disaster. They thought this is going to be a medium of people being brainwashed by this new system of getting into our heads, into our homes. It hasn't been like that. But broadcasting has introduced new varieties of the language. Think of all the things you can do on the radio and on television that you couldn't do before, like sports commentary. Think of a football commentary. You know, that didn't exist until, you know, the last few decades. Think of news reading, weather forecasting, chat shows. All of these come in as a result of broadcasting. Now, the internet is doing exactly the same thing. The internet arrives not so long ago. You guys here, most of you have never known a world without the internet. Those of us who are slightly less young well remember a world without the internet. We're talking only since the 1990s, remember. The World Wide Web arrives in 1991. Only. When could you have first done a search on Google? Not before 1999, because Google didn't exist before then. Those of us who are older, when did we first send an email? Not before the mid-90s. So text messaging on your mobile phones, when did that come in? Not until the early 2000s. Instant messaging, early 2000s. Blogging. The word blog arrives in 1997. It's short for weblog, meaning the kind of diary that you can put on the web. Nobody blogged before about 2003. Facebook. 2004. Only. Facebook has not been here forever. Only 2004. YouTube, 2005. Twitter, 2006. How many of you tweet? Any of you? Any of you actually use Twitter? There's a couple of hands going up. Anybody read other people's tweets very much? Again, not many of you, but Facebook? Yeah, nods, yeah, nod. Yeah, all over the place. Yeah, but these are examples of new technologies developing into new styles of English. Now, each of these internet outputs that I've talked about has a distinctive English style. Oh, heck, it's not just English, a distinctive Serbian style too, a distinctive any language style. The style you use when you're texting is not the style you use when you're blogging or Facebooking or Twittering and so on. And notice that the technologies influence the language in quite specific ways. The most obvious examples are the short messaging services like text messaging and tweeting. So text messaging is 160 characters, isn't it? That's your maximum. If you're sending a message through your mobile phone, that's your lot. If you're going to tweet, you've got 140 characters. The reason for the difference is that if you're tweeting, which is really sending your text message to the web, that's what Twitter's all about, sending your text message, which is normally just to one person, so that everybody can read it. And now you've got 140 characters, and the reason is you have to have 20 characters for your ID, you see. You've got to say who you are. That leaves you 140. Short? Well, yes, but not that short. I mean, 140 characters for English, that's about 30 words. We can say quite a lot in 30 words, you know, so it's not as short as all that. But anyway, the point I'm making is that that technology influences a language in quite specific ways. So let's just take Twitter as the example. It arrives in 2006. If you tweeted, if you went online, you would be given a prompt. And the prompt was, in 2006, what are you doing? What are you doing? So you would say, I am doing whatever. I am on a train. Really interesting stuff, this. I am watching a film. I am stuck in a lift. There was a famous example of Stephen Fry. You may know Stephen Fry, who got stuck in a lift in early 2006 or 7. And he tweeted to the whole world, I am stuck in a lift. And millions of people wanted to see his next tweet to find out when he was out of the lift. And it took a long time. And it took all day. And he kept it going and going and going. And suddenly everybody realized that Twitter could tell you what was going on in people's minds. And that's how it started. Notice, what are you doing? Very introvert, isn't it? I am, lots of first-person pronouns. Present tenses, I am stuck in the lift. And then in 2009, Twitter changed its prompt. Instead of what are you doing, the prompt became, what's happening? Tell us what's happening. Now think about that for a second. What are you doing says, look into yourself. What's happening says, look around you. So suddenly, there are not so many first-person pronouns. There are third-person pronouns now. He's doing this, she's doing that, they're doing that. The tenses start to alter. Past tense as well as future tense. This has just happened. I've just seen something. I'm about to see something. The advertisers come on Twitter and say, look at our new book. This is what we're selling. And Twitter suddenly becomes a kind of news reporting service rather than a diary. And a fundamental linguistic change takes place as a result, simply because not just the technology, but the software with the technology makes you think in a different way from what you were doing before. So I generalize that point now, you see, and say every internet domain that you're dealing with influences the way in which you use language, sometimes in quite specific ways. But it isn't yet possible to predict the future because it's also recent. It takes a long time before new trends, technological or otherwise, actually influence the language in a permanent sort of way. You know, the internet is too young yet to know exactly how much influence it is going to have on English or Serbian or whatever language. I know people think that the internet is having a major influence on language, that the English language today is not the same as it was 20 years ago. That's rubbish. The English language today is almost identical with what it was 20 years ago. I know there are new abbreviations that have come into text messaging like LOL, you know, LOL, you know, things like this. But this is cool stuff, but there isn't very much like that. This is a tiny fraction of the English language. The vast majority of English is exactly the same today as it was 20 years ago. In 100 years' time, maybe there will be a lot of influence from the internet. But at the moment, it's pretty stable.
So should authority figures be worried about texting and Facebook and social media, or should they just be encouraged to see it as a temporary phenomenon which does not affect the basics?
Oh, I think very much that the prophets of doom are out there, and they always come out when there is a new technology. There were prophets of doom with printing in the 15th century, saying printing is a terrible thing because it will mean anybody can say what they like in public. I told you already, the prophets of doom with telephones. They thought this is a disaster for society. Prophets of doom with the internet as well. Yes, there are some famous figures that have gone into print and said text messaging especially is a disaster for the English language. There is a commentator in Britain who everybody knows in Britain. His name is John Humphreys because he runs the morning breakfast show, and so everybody listens, you see. He's very well known. And in the Daily Mail a few years ago, he was on record as saying that The young people of today are ruining the English language. They are doing to English what the Vandals and Goths did to society all those hundreds of centuries ago, raping and pillaging the English language, destroying it with your abbreviations, your horrible abbreviations. Don't you know what you're doing? Kind of attitude. Again, total rubbish. Why? Because text messaging, and likewise all the other internet activities, was never full of abbreviations. When you actually do collect, as linguists do, a collection of text messages, and you look at them and you count up all the abbreviations that are in those text messages, you find that the average number of abbreviations in a text is only 10%. In other words, 90% or so of the language you use in a text is standard English, you know. I mean, or at least your local dialect maybe, but not a brand new language full of crazy abbreviations that nobody has ever seen before.